This is Research Like a Pro, episode 162, Tracing 19th Century Germans, Part 3. Welcome to Research Like a Pro, a genealogy podcast about taking your research to the next level, hosted by Nicole Dyer and Diana Elder, accredited genealogy professional. Diana and Nicole are the mother-daughter team at FamilyLocket.com and the creators of the Amazon best-selling book, Research Like a Pro, A Genealogist's Guide. I'm Nicole, co-host of the podcast. Join Diana and me as we discuss how to stay organized, make progress in our research, and solve difficult cases. Let's go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Research Like a Pro.
Hi, Nicole. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And I've been watching the lectures that were recorded from the latest Institute course that I took, just trying to catch up on any parts that I missed. It was at IGHR, the Institute of Genealogical and Historical Research. It was the Advanced DNA Evidence course. And we heard from a lot of guest lecturers that I hadn't heard before, like Michael Lacapo and Kimberly Powell. And it was really good. Karen Stanbury and Paul Woodbury were the other instructors, and David Rencher. And I really gained a lot from Karen Stanbury's visual phasing lecture. That was fun. I watched that again really slowly and took really careful notes and made a plan for how I can start working on visual phasing, just because I want to understand how to do it. And I have the 3 brothers all ready to go in GEDmatch, so why not try a couple chromosomes?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I remember studying that chapter in advanced genetic genealogy a few times to really understand it. And when I did the DNA practicum last fall, the advanced practicum, Karen's case did have some practice with visual phasing. And so then I looked at that again, but I didn't really have time in that week to dive into it. So I am so curious to see how you do it and what you find. That'll be really neat.
Yeah, the main takeaway I got from the lecture is that, although you can do segment mapping at DNA Painter, you're not always going to have the whole chromosome mapped out. You'll just have the matches that you've found. And so with visual phasing, you can use some of the matches that you don't have, the negative space, inference, and logic to help you map out most of the whole chromosome and figure out which of the 4 grandparents that came from for each of your 3 testers. So it really gives you more to compare against when you get an unknown match.
Right, because then you take the exact segment that they match you on, and then you look at your chromosome map, and then you can say, oh, wow, it's that line.
Yeah. So how are you doing, and what is up with you?
Well, last week at IGHR, I took Tom Jones' course on writing, and that was fabulous. And I've set the goal that I want to submit an article to the NGSQ, one of my past research projects, and get it all written up in a proof argument form. I have some good research that I've done that I would like to submit, but I realized that I need to rewrite it in a different form because right now it's in a report form and I need to get it into a proof argument format. So the course was great because it just basically laid it all out clearly for what we need to do. And I learned so many good tips on better writing. I think we should never rest easy with our abilities, and always am trying to improve, and I learned a lot about becoming a better writer. It was great.
Oh, fantastic. I'm excited about your goal. I have that goal too, but I think I'm going to wait until after I do my portfolio, which keeps getting kind of pushed off as I keep having things come up. But I'm working on it slowly.
We'll get there.
Some announcements. We still have a few spots left in our DNA study group this fall. So if you would like to join us, we'd love to have you. And then we also have been working on planning for 2022. We are switching the order that we do the study groups. So instead of having the Research Like a Pro with DNA study group in the fall again, we're moving that to the spring. So that means we're going to have 2 DNA study groups back to back. So we'll have the one this fall and then another one this spring. And then the traditional Research Like a Pro study group will be next fall in 2022. And the reason we're doing that is just because there's not quite as much time in the fall because of the holidays to finish the DNA study group, and it's just kind of a longer one. There's 12 to 13 weeks for that one. So we're going to put it in the spring when there's a little more time.
Yeah, I think that'll be really wise. When you've gone through the whole thing, you want to finish up with a good, strong finish, and we just found people start to get a little stressed out about the holidays coming up. So this will be a good switch. All right. Well, today we have got Heidi Mathis with us again, and we're going to talk more about her blog post series, Tracing Your 19th Century German Ancestors. This has been such a fun blog post series and podcast series. So, welcome, Heidi.
It's good to be back.
Can we just kind of review for our listeners?
In the past blog posts and podcasts, we went over German history and we went over looking for every possible US based record. And then we went over steps for learning to read German language records. And today we're finally going to take our virtual trip to Germany and learn how to use German based records. And we're going to keep using our example person who's Burkhard Schlag, who's my third great grandfather. And we're going to be looking at the German genealogy megasite called Comgen.de. It also goes by genealogy.net. And we're going to be trying to locate German genealogical societies, German state archives, or Sippenbooks, OFBs, relevant to our German ancestor. And we're also going to use compgen.de has an amazing section for looking at the jurisdictions of our German's hometown. And one last thing I want to include is that I'm going to be using some German terms in this podcast, and I do not speak German. And so I want to apologize in advance for just incorrect pronunciation. So apologize to all you German speakers out there.
Well, you're going to be much better than me because I don't even have a clue how to say that. I've been working on my French, so I could have done some French, and with the surname of Schultz, I should have taken German, right? I do have that German heritage.
It's never too late.
Nope, it's not. After I get my French down.
All right. Well, thanks for that recap, Heidi. So let's talk next about the case where our U.S. research has helped us discover the hometown of our German ancestor, which is always so exciting. What are kind of the first steps when you have that hometown?
Well, that is like the holy grail, is to find that German ancestor's hometown. And if you found that, then you're going to want to check in American-based German church books. And those can be found at Ancestry, but especially at Family Search. And so you're going to want to just scour that to the best of your ability. Just remembering that not everything is indexed. So you're going to want to remember that. You might have to be flipping electronically through some pages. But if you have looked and you cannot find your particular hometown on the American based searches, another thing you can do is to try Myers Gazetteer, which we talked about in an earlier episodes. What you do is, you type in your ancestor's hometown and you click under ecclesiastical, and it will show you a list of churches that were nearest by religion. And so you could also search for nearby villages in that way. So if you've done that and you still cannot find your German's church books, the next place to look is on the German online services. And yeah, you've got to remember that not every German church record still exists and not every existing record is online yet, but many have survived and are online. So you're going to want to check. There are two German-based online church record sets that you want to check. There's the entirely Protestant one called archeon.de, and that does cost, it's like $20 for a month. It's well worth it. And even before you start searching that one, you can check to see if your village is on there for free. That's nice because you only have to pay if you know your records are there. And then if you have Catholic ancestors, the other site is called Matricula. That's what we're going to be looking at. So I did look for my ancestor, Burkhard Schlags. I didn't find him in Ancestry or Family Search, but I did find his church records on Archeon. However, sadly, when I got to those records of Zunterbach, finally, I noticed that the baptism started in June of 1830, which was 3 months later than Burckhardt's birthday. His birthday was in March of 1830. So he was not going to be found in the book. So like I said, I went back to Myers Gazetteer and I found that Oberzell was a village that was close to Zuntersbach with a Lutheran church. And I started looking through Oberzell and I just noticed that there were just almost no Schlags in that one. And that's kind of always a helpful sign. Like if you're getting into a church book and you're just not seeing your ancestor's surname at all, it's definitely a strong hint that that's probably not the correct place. And it wasn't for me. I didn't find Burckhardt or his family in Oberzell. I needed another strategy.
Wow, that was good. That's really good that you went back and tried to find another village. I think a lot of us would have just given up after finding that the baptisms didn't begin before our ancestors' birth date. But that's so smart to go and find nearby villages to see if they would have recorded the baptism in another church, But unfortunately, you didn't find it. So that's so sad. So let me recap the suggestions. So start with the US based databases at Ancestry and Family Search. And then if you don't find it there, you can try the German based databases, Archeon and Matricula.
Exactly. And just keep going back to Myers because it just helpfully lists your village and then the nearest churches and the distance away by religion as well. You definitely have a great resource in Myers.
That sounds like such a great gazetteer. I am just wishing we had that for every locality that we research. How
I do
awesome.
too. It's absolutely, you get kind of spoiled in some ways in this German
Yeah.
research. So
And I think you pointed out something really helpful, that you have to know when the records started being kept. These churches, when they sprang up and when they started keeping records, and that's going to help you to figure things out. So you mentioned that there's another strategy when you just don't find your guy where you think he should be. And I'm kind of guessing that that's what I do in my Southern research, which is I start looking for the fan club, those friends, associates, and neighbors. Does that apply to German research as well?
most definitely. So I was lucky in this case. I had noticed that there were other schlags associated with Burckhardt in his St. Louis locality here in the US. One was buried in his plot, and a few others, Burckhardt's children had a business with some of these younger schlags. And so, I hypothesized that it's possible that these were potentially Burckhardt's nieces and nephews. And so I kept researching these younger schlags, and I found some great newspaper articles for them and was able to kind of start to understand that their relationships. Then I started noticing that there was a DNA connection between their descendants and my dad and my aunt. And so that was really exciting to see that. So what I did was I started researching these younger schlags. They had their birth dates, and one of them had a death certificate where they listed that their parents were John Schlag and Elizabeth Zirkel. And so I started looking in Archeon for these younger schlags, and I just often, it's amazing, German birth dates are really accurate. So all I had to do was go to the Zunterbach church books on Archeon, and I found all of them, just chronologically, basically. And so that was really exciting to find that. And they all had the same parents. And so I started to look for a marriage record for John Schlag and Elizabeth Zirkel. And I found one of Johannes Schlag and Elizabeth Zirkel. And I found their marriage in 1859. So it was after that 1830 cutoff for me. And because German records can often be so good, it listed both of the bride and groom's parents. So, just my theory was that Johannes and Burckhardt were brothers. And so it listed that Johannes's parents were Heinrich Schlag and Elizabeth Muller. And so I was able, because this was such a small village, I was kind of able to find kind of the structure of this family. Helpfully, there's often a family number in there, and I think it's like an address, and that's how you can kind of tell that the schlags that you're looking at are yours. Anyway, I was able to kind of confirm like a family for Heinrich Schlag and Elizabeth Muller. And in that way, I never got direct proof that they were Burckhardt's parents, but I had an inference through DNA and through records that Burckhardt's brother was Johannes Schlag, and so that I could at least theorize that Heinrich Schlag and Elizabeth Muller were the parents of my Burckhardt.
Oh, that's great. So you think that there really was no baptism record that survived for him?
Exactly. I think that there is just like any other place, there's a lot of destruction of records. I imagine there once was a record for Burckhardt, but so many wars in Germany, there's just a
Right.
lot of destruction. But it's amazing how much remains.
Right. So by connecting the family that you found in the United States with the same surname and this place that you had researched and knew that he was from, you were able to put it all together. And that's great that you've got the DNA too. We're going to talk about that in the next episode. But isn't it wonderful to have that confirmation?
Oh, I was so excited. You know how you have an ancestor and some of them you feel more connected to or you just kind of fall in love with. And for some reason, I just have fallen in love with Burkhard. And so I was really excited to be able to get some answers on him.
Well, great job finding those fan club members in the US and keeping track of them so that when you got to this point in your research, you had some other clues and some other people to look up.
So I felt really lucky in this case.
So, what if you're having a hard time finding the parish records for your ancestor? Are there some other things you can do?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're going to find the village of your ancestor, but you're just not going to be able to find them online, like in Archeon or in Matricula. So here's a couple things you can try before you just give up and start knocking on doors in Germany. Um, you can try looking for what's called an OFB, and that stands for Ortsfamilienbuch, and or it's a town family book, and that those have been put together from civil records, from church records, by just local people who are interested in genealogy, and they put together these wonderful books. And so those are sometimes online, sometimes in print, and so if you can find one of those for your village, you're definitely home free. So you want to check that before you give up. And you later we're going to talk about how to look for those. And then also another thing to definitely try, and this actually worked for me in a different case, was contacting a local German genealogical society in the area where you know your ancestor was from. I had a situation where I did have an ancestor. I knew where they were from because of great American German records, and their church books were just not online anywhere, and there was no OFBs. But I actually contacted the German Genealogical Society there, and they were so nice, and they put me in contact with this very wonderful man called Uwe, who was putting together an OFB for the area, and he just went to town on my ancestors and just sent me all this great information. So
Yes,
you definitely want to try those German genealogy societies.
that's great. Did you just email them or call them? And did they speak English? I'm guessing
Well,
yes.
actually, I had met a woman at the German Genealogical Conference, and we it just got over with. It's the International German Genealogical Conference, and in 2019 they had a booth for the area that my this other ancestor was from, and so I actually got to talk to her in person. And she did speak English, and I did write to her in English. And so, actually, Family Search, and I included this in the blog post, has a way to write letters in German to people. And so what I often do is I write in English and then I try to translate it in, by using Google Translate in German on the page, just in case I'm talking to someone who doesn't speak English and just to be polite. But in this case, this woman did speak English, and she was so helpful. Couldn't have been more helpful. So you just never know. And also by contacting them, they may be able to put you in touch with somebody who's local who you could pay to do some of this research.
That's so great to have a connection like that and to just kind of have a way to get a little more help on the ground.
Oh, absolutely, especially when it's another country and you just kind of have no idea what, the lay of the land is.
That is really great. And it's fun to know that genealogy societies are not just limited to the United States, right?
Absolutely. And I was in that conference and I had another great experience with getting in touch with somebody from yet another place in Germany. And I have to say, they were so friendly and helpful. Sometimes Germans are tracing their ancestors, their more distant relatives who immigrated to the United States. And so there's kind of a fun connection there.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. So you can have some give and take helping back and forth. So that's neat.
Absolutely.
So, what else is there available online? We can't make it to Germany right now. Are there some other things that we can do online?
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to talk now about this amazing website called, goes by a bunch of different names, but comgen.de is one, and it has a GenWiki page. And it also, like I said before, goes under genealogy.net as well. But basically, this is a huge website for that Germans are using today to research their own ancestors. And so it's kind of similar to the Research Wiki on family search, but the challenge is, of course, it's all in German. There is an English version, but it just doesn't have as much information. So what I do is I get up the same page in two different windows in Chrome, and you can, right click with Chrome and it can translate the page. And so I'll have one page translated in English, but I'll keep the other page up in German just to follow through what's going on, because sometimes for some reason Chrome will just switch you to the English page, and you won't really know it. So that's why I keep those two up, and plus it also helps me with just starting to learn how to navigate the site and respond to the German terms instead of just the English ones. In this, I'm going to be talking a little bit about just 4 parts of this really big and kind of scary website for an English speaker. And I watched this really great webinar from Legacy Family Tree by Teresa Steinkamp McMillan. And so if you are going to dive into this website and you just feel overwhelmed, I would definitely recommend her webinar on a Legacy Family Tree. So in my blog post, I talked about 4 different tabs basically on this GenWiki page that are worth dipping your toe into for a beginner. And this is definitely where I have started. So the first one are those OFBs, or Orts Family Books, that are on GenWiki. And let me back up and say that I'm going to go over OFBs and then Verina, which is Genealogical Society, is what we were talking about. And then this other tab called GOV, which is a gazetteer like Myers, only instead of it only being from 1 year, it's like Myers is kind of frozen in time. This GOV tab shows you the history of the jurisdictions of your village. So it's kind of amazing. And then the last tab we'll go over is called the regional tab, and that kind of gets you into the different German archives.
Wow, that is so cool to know that there's this amazing website. And I am looking at it and just thinking this is really a must. If you're going to do German genealogy, you've got to learn how to navigate it. And I know sometimes it can be a challenge when you come to these types of online databases, or sometimes for the United States, we have an archive catalog that just looks like Greek to us when we're trying to navigate it. So I know from experience it's worthwhile to learn how to do it, and I'm glad you're going to walk us through it, and that you have identified some of the most important things to look at, because there is a lot going on this website.
It is a little foreboding, isn't it?
Well, it's beautiful. It's just a lot.
Well, let's start with the first 2 parts of GenWiki that you talked about, the OFBs and the Verina.
So the OFBs are, first we have to keep in mind that there are only a small portion of the OFBs are actually been put online. And so this part of GenWiki is going to just show us a portion of those. So if you want to see if your villages is online, you'll go to the GenWiki site and you'll click the OFB tab that's at the top. And you just want to remember that they're organized by German state. As an example, I used Burkhardt's wife. Her name was Christina Reckermann, and she was from a village in Westphalia, and her village was called Nordhemmeren, and it had associated villages called Hilla and Hallen and Hartum. And so I looked under the North Rhine-Westphalia part of this OFB tab, and I did not find any of her localities there. And so I knew that her OFB has not been put online yet. But I did look in the family search catalog, and I did find the Hartum. I think it was the Hartum OFB was there, and she's in that one. And so as an example, I also looked for Burkhardt's to see if there was an OFB for Burkhardt, and I looked under his state, and Zuntersbach was, I think, a really tiny place. And so I have a feeling there's never been anyone that's put together an OFB for his village. So that was kind of a bummer for me, but that's not going to be uncommon. And then a second tab you can look at is the Vereine tab, and that's the German word for society or club. Under this tab, you're just going to see a list of the existing German genealogical societies, and you just kind of have to work with that and experiment with it. Before I knew this tab was around, I had tried Googling German words for genealogy, or the area that actually Christine was from, and I just had zero luck actually coming upon a German genealogical society. So the fact that this tab is here is fantastic, because you can click through these and just figure out which one goes to what part of Germany. That would be great, because then you can start exploring their website and figuring it out to the best of your ability. And if you get stuck, you can try emailing them and seeing if they can help you.
That's fantastic. I'm just looking at the website now and it's translated into English. And so it's German genealogical associations, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
What about looking for specific archives or jurisdictions? I know those can be tricky, knowing which government body was in charge at what time. So, does GenWiki.de help us with that?
Yes, absolutely. This other really amazing tab that is on GenWiki, and it's called the GOV tab, and that's also along the top. So, just as I was saying before, that Myers Gazetteer is fantastic, but it is telling you the jurisdictions that were there somewhere before 1912, and it stops there. But this Gov tab on GenWiki, if you click on that, and there'll be a search box that says Orts, and that Orts means place in German. And so you put in your village, and you'll be able to hopefully navigate to your village, and then it will show you this kind of flow chart of your village's jurisdictions over time. And so in that way, you can get a clue as to where you might be needing to look to find archives for your village. Again, I wish that every place I looked had like a place that you could go to find the history of your locality's jurisdictions. Wouldn't that be amazing? And then the last tab I talked about in the blog post was the regional tab, and that's at the top. And it's a little bit hard to describe online, but I showed in the blog post how you could navigate to the various state archives. There's 16 states in Germany, and you can get to their states archives, and it's just fun to click around on those and see what's available there. Germany has a few national archives, and the overall national archives are called Bundesarchiv, and that would be like our national archives in Washington, D.C. But these states archives will be the next level, and it's very equivalent to looking in Missouri, and those archives are going to be much more specific if you were looking for people in Missouri, and it's the same in Germany. And then you want to also try to remember that there will be archives that are even more local than that, and you'll probably have to find those. At least I don't know how to find those except through contacting German genealogical societies. I also wanted to mention, so I talked about how you can use GenWiki to find these German state archives, but there's a couple of other ways you can find it. Family Search has a wiki page for the German archives and libraries with clickable links. And also there's a German Wikipedia page. So you have to look on the wikipedia.de and look for this term Staatsarchiv, and that's STAATSARCHIV. And if you put that into the German Wikipedia, it'll get to this great page where they'll give you clickable links to all 16 of the German archives. And I just highly recommend playing around with that and seeing what you can learn.
Wow, as you've been talking about this, I've just really been thinking about the value of a locality guide for this German research for whatever specific village or area that you are researching, because it would be impossible to keep all of this in your head. You would have to be writing all this down and having all these links, and I can't even imagine trying to do this without formulating a really great locality guide.
Absolutely. It's so important. And this website, if you can learn GenWiki, provides you some great it's almost already a locality guide for some of these things, but it would be good to make your own for sure.
Well, you could at least have a link to that, right? In case you lose where you found it. Because sometimes I'll do that. I'll be clicking around and I'll find a great site. And then if I come back and I haven't recorded that anywhere, I can't find it as quickly or I can't find it again. I think we've all done that and it's so frustrating. So,
Oh yeah, do that all the time.
yeah, it's good to just keep track of where you've been and get all the help to research your area as much as you research the records, learning about what to do. Well, thank you so much, Heidi. This has been really fun to talk all about actually tackling some research within Germany using the online sources.
Yeah, I just wanted to be able to provide like a beginning for myself and for others, just realizing that it isn't as scary as we may think to be able to get some really great answers, because German records are really good and we don't want to like take ourselves out of the game just because it's in another language.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you, Heidi. And we'll talk to you guys again next week.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening. We hope that something you heard today will help you make progress in your research. If you want to learn more, purchase our book, Research Like a Pro, A Genealogist Guide, on Amazon.com and other booksellers. You can also register for our Research Like a Pro online course or join our next study group. Learn more at FamilyLocket.com. To share your progress and ask questions, join our private Facebook group by sending us your book receipt or joining our e-course or study group. If you like what you heard and would like to support this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. We hope you'll start now to research like a pro.